We're joined this morning by Senator Dan Coats. Senator, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Let's talk about the sudden vacancy on the Supreme Court. It is all the talk in Washington, all across the country right now. You have said, and I want to get this right, the American people should determine the next Supreme Court justice by their vote in November. So you don't even want the president to bring a nomination forward.
Well, the president knows the nomination's not going to go forward unless he brings somebody that basically stands for the Constitution, is equal or close to Justice Scalia. During his presidency, he has appointed two to the Supreme Court that basically fall in his camp. The president's defiance of, I think, the Constitution and bypassing the Congress on so many executive orders and so forth, a major issue before the Supreme Court, he's going to send somebody up that is dead on arrival. And why go through all that? You know, when the shoe was on the other foot, Republicans were in charge. The Democrats were saying, oh, in election year, never. You can't bring somebody up in election year. It gets too political. Well, clearly, this is the most political election year that any of us have seen in a long time. So I think it's important to let the American people see this as an issue regarding the power of the president versus the power of the people's elected representatives. And that's why I think it's just meaningless for the president to throw somebody out there. They'll make it into a political issue, but maybe the American people ought to be the ones to decide how we go forward. It's 4-4 right now in the court. We're losing a giant of intellect, a giant of faithfulness to the Constitution, and it's clear the president's not going to appoint somebody that goes against his view of the Constitution, even though he was a constitutional law lawyer. Some questions there about what his intent was.
We had posted your statement on Twitter at Indy this week. A lot of our viewers and followers then commented and said that the American people have voted for this already. They voted for it in 2008. They voted for it in 2012 by electing President Barack Obama twice to that post. Your reaction to that?
Well, there's two things here. It's not just the president who's in the White House. It's also the kind of person that he puts forward. Clearly, with the vacancies on the Democrat side, the president appointed two Supreme Court justices. I wasn't in the Senate at the time, but appointed two that followed his views. In this case, in my opinion here, we have a president who has, as I said, trying now to fill a slot by someone who is of the ideology and the brilliance of Justice Scalia, and the consistency of being faithful to the Constitution as written, and the president's totally on the other side of that. So it's a non-starter, given the fact that the Senate is controlled by Republicans and believes that this issue is so important to the division of powers and faithfulness to the Constitution, as it specifically limits what the president has violated, that it ought to be given up to the people.
What about someone like Judge Jane Kelly on the 8th Circuit, Greencastle, Indiana native, and you would have a chance to at least debate someone like that while you are still serving in the Senate?
Well, I have also said that if the president does nominate someone and that person meets the criteria of what I think a Supreme Court justice ought to have, that the experience, the temperament, the judgment, and the faithfulness to the Constitution, and it comes before the Senate, certainly I will then set this aside and not just have a blind no, but say, okay, that this person's here, we have to make a decision, and let's evaluate that person. I had the privilege of shepherding Congressman Judge Alito through the confirmation process, and I had learned a lot from that and named a lot of criteria in terms of what a judge ought to have in order to be a faithful lifetime constitutional justice in the Supreme Court, and I would apply those same principles to whoever the president brings up.
Much more to come on this debate in the days and weeks surely ahead. Let's talk about the race to potentially replace you now. The State Election Commission looking, of course, at the ballot issue that has been tied to the Todd Young campaign and whether or not he has fallen a couple signatures short in one of his districts. Your reaction to all this?
It's clear to me they were just trying to take out the guy they thought was going to be the toughest to beat in this. What surprised me was that our other candidate jumped on with the Democrats. Of course, who wouldn't want to be the only guy on the ballot? But Indiana needs to have a choice in terms of who follows on in the United States Senate, and to take that choice away without even knowing the facts, jumping on it, and some others here in the Republican Party did that also, jumping on Todd, was unseemly and I think unfair.
You said that Todd Young was the strongest choice. Would you endorse him ahead of the primary?
I've said I wouldn't endorse, but I also said that I want this to be a fair choice for the Hoosier people, that I shouldn't be the one dictating who should be that candidate. But this was unseemly and I think so self-serving that I may reevaluate that. But I haven't done this so far.
Speaking of potential endorsements, the the Republican presidential race right now really wide open as it crisscrosses across the country, possibly putting Indiana in play come May. Is there a chance that you would endorse a presidential candidate ahead of the primary here?
Yeah, there is a chance. I do think the Republicans are looking for a new face. I think the public's looking for a new face. We have a talented group of up-and-comings, many of them with good experience, but not viewed as tired old establishment. We're in a position, I think, to do very well because I think tired old establishment applies to the other party this time. And so I'd like to see somebody who reaches out to the younger generation, has new ideas, new dynamics. I think when Marco Rubio said this election's not about the past, it's about the future, it really struck home because I think the Democrat Party is clearly about the past given their candidates, and I think we have a real shot at being clearly about the future.
Senator Dan Coates, thanks so much for being
Pleasure.
here with us.
Right.
Good to see you.
Right.